how are we supposed to apply all of these Old Testament laws to our day-to-day lives? We're moving into the second half of the book of Exodus. Now, in Exodus chapter 19, the Israelites are finally out of slavery. They're before Mount Sinai, and God comes down to talk to them through Moses. And he reminds them of his grace. He reminds them that he carried them out of Egypt on eagle's wings. Pure grace. They did nothing on their own. He carried them. And now he gives them stipulations of their new relationship. He bought them, in a way, you could say, bought them with his own blood. He redeemed them. He made them his own. And now they have this contract, this covenant, this relationship. And really all relationships have some kind of agreement. When we enter into marriage, it's a covenant that these two people promise to be faithful to one another and to love one another. And that's kind of the similar relationship, almost kind of a wedding marriage ceremony that's going on here in Exodus 19 and 20, that with the 10 Commandments and then the giving of the other laws. And so, in a way, we're supposed to look at this from a distance. This is God giving his vows, his relationships, establishing this relationship, this covenant with the ancient Israelites. This is not necessarily the covenant he set up with us. We're part of the new covenant. And yet, we do learn something about who God is by looking at this from a distance. That's right, the 10 Commandments don't necessarily directly apply to us. In the New Testament, Jesus summarized those by bringing out the two great commands, also found in the Old Testament, but love God and love your neighbor. And the 10 Commandments are kind of repeated, the same similar principles and ideas, but not specifically under this kind of old covenant relationship. And so I think what we can do is we look at this from a distance and see how God dealt with his people, see what was important to God, see what mattered to God as he was calling out this people to be his own bride, his own people. And one thing that we learn is that God takes the ancient customs of the day and he makes laws to raise the dignity of human beings. I learned this especially from a book, I think Paul Copan is the name of the author. The book is called Is God a Moral Monster? I'd encourage you to read that if this is an area of interest to you. But for example, in chapter 21 of Exodus, it talks about slavery. Slavery was ubiquitous. It was everywhere. I heard one person compare slavery to electricity, especially in the ancient Roman world. It was everywhere. And so instead of changing the whole society, the whole world at that time, slavery was all over the world, the Lord seemed to put in boundaries and barriers to make it more humane. Obviously, his final thought on slavery was the exodus out of Egypt, this kind of, especially this ethical slavery or ethnic slavery. In many ways, in the ancient world, slavery was connected with debt. If you owed a debt to somebody, you would be put into slavery until you paid off that debt. But for the most part, God was taking the ancient customs of that day, and he was raising human dignity. He was raising up for peace. And in many ways, you could say also what is mentioned here, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. The punishment fits the crime. So many of these laws are about letting the consequences fit some of the injustice. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an overview. It's kind of hard to slog through, obviously, but I think you read these from a distance. You see how God dealt with his ancient people. It teaches us something about God, that God raised up human dignity, that he cares about our personal property, that he cares about human sex and sexuality, about humanity and dignity, relationships, the least of these, the marginalized in society, and yet it would be almost impossible or useless to pick up all these laws and somehow just kind of download them into our modern court system, because we have a different contract and covenant with our authorities and our country, and we have a different covenant and contract even with our God through the work of Jesus Christ. So hopefully that helps. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below, and hopefully I can answer them in a future video. All right, keep reading, don't give up.